Hey, this is Michaela Jill Murphy. I voiced Toph Beifong on Avatar The Last Airbender, and you're watching Pop Culture with Pat. Make sure to check it out, Twinkle Toes.
Hey guys, welcome back to Pop Culture with Pat. Today I have a special guest on the show with me, Michaela Jill Murphy, aka Jessie Flower, and she voiced Toph on the show Avatar The Last Airbender. Thank you for coming on the show today, Michaela.
Sure thing. Thank you for having me.
Now, to start things off, to kind of go back way to the beginning, how did you first decide, that you wanted to get into acting, and I guess specifically, voice acting?
Well, I was actually about 5 years old, and I've always been very performative, so that was never an issue. But a friend of mine in school actually was in a commercial, and I think we had a copy of it. I'm not exactly sure how I ended up watching them, but I ended up watching the commercial they were in, and I turned to my mom, and I was like, hey, this seems fun. And she's like, sure. Okay, let's see how serious you are. And so she had me audition for a musical first. Oliver was my first production that I was in. I played an orphan. Woohoo! And then I was in that, and, I loved it. So she was like, okay, she's serious. Let's get some headshots done. And then I, started auditioning for some commercials, and that's kind of where it all began. Hollywood was definitely a little different in, the late 90s, early 2000s than it is today. So, yeah, it was just kind of a new world, especially for youth acting, I think. It hadn't really been as developed as it is now. So, yeah, that's kind of where it all began.
Okay. And now, so everyone knows you, as Toph on the show, but not as many people probably realize, which I actually didn't for a little while, but that your first voice on the show was the character of Mang. So, how did you just first off, hear about the show, whether it be an agent or something, but how did you hear about the show, and just what was your audition process like for, both of those characters?
Yeah, so my agent, CESD, they were my voiceover agent then, and they still are to this day. They actually are in charge of sending me out on auditions. So I hadn't actually heard of the show until I was on it, because I didn't really have cable. I had PBS for Saturday morning cartoons, and then other than that, I just watched a lot of DVDs and VHS movies at home. So I actually hadn't heard of it, and they just sent me the audition. And I got the voice of Mang first, and then when they decided to make Toph a girl, because originally she was supposed to be kind of like the bolder character in her intro episode, I think they just started auditioning internally, so with female actresses that they had worked with before, just to see if there was a Toph voice in the mix with somebody who was familiar with them and the show, and then it ended up working out. They liked my voice for Toph, so that's how that ended up happening.
Yeah, so what was your favorite scene to work on for the show, and then what was your favorite scene to watch as a fan of the show?
Okay, so probably to watch, I always love watching Tales of Ba Sing Se, just because it's such a different flow than the rest of this, the rest of the show, I suppose. It kind of gives you little snippets of each character just doing normal things. A lot of the time you see them either packing up or planning or fighting or trying to, survive, and then Ba Sing Se, they just get a moment of breath. So I really like that episode as a fan. To work on, there are so many favorite ones. I mean, The Blind Bandit, of course, is a favorite just because that was the beginning. That was the beginning of me, and that was kind of the beginning of me understanding, trying to understand kind of fight vocals. So when you're in the ring and you're bending, and kind of where that sound comes from. Is it from the back of your throat? Is it from your gut? When somebody hits your shoulder, or you get knocked up against a wall, what sounds accompany that? So it was kind of this world of exploration where I was in the recording booth, just kind of pretending I'd gotten hit, or if I had my back slammed against the wall, and seeing what comes out of that. So it was a lot of fun to figure out those little voices that you don't really pay attention to, in between actual verbal lines.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I can imagine, especially doing some of that kind of stuff, those weird little voices must have been kind of weird, probably for the first time.
Yeah,
definitely. Because I was like, oh yeah, you just talk, you have a conversation, and I was like, oh no, we're in combat. There's a whole new world of sounds that are going to be discovered here.
And looking back on the show, was there anything that you would have liked to see Toph do or experience that she didn't get to, like in the show's like original run?
Yeah, I was actually talking about this with somebody else the other day. I feel like she never got her moment of romance the way that everybody else did. And, she maybe had glimmers of it, but she never really got something that was kind of all to herself. And I know that that's not necessarily Toph's, color. She's not the maternal one. She's not, the hot one, quote unquote, that sort of thing. She's not a Ty Lee. She's not a Suki. But I think she has a lot of heart, and I think she very much wants to be recognized as like an attractive, person to somebody. And I think that shows in, certain moments with Sokka or Zuko or just kind of some other male figures. And so, I don't know, I kind of wish that she had a little moment of just reciprocated affection, because I just don't think she ever got that. It's not the worst thing, but I would have liked to see it.
Yeah, no, and that's understandable. And just curious, like, out of all, if you had to pick one of the characters, who would you have liked to see her have that like affection from, or that moment with?
I mean, I'm personally a Taka fan. I do think that they play off of each other quite well because they're often both comedic relief, but just kind of different shades. Sokka's a bit more slapstick, and she's just so dry and sarcastic. So I don't know. I think that would have been cute. But I also understand why he ended up kind of with Suki. I get it.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And what are, I guess, like, not necessarily like scenes, but what were just some of your favorite like interactions Toph had as far as with like other characters on the show?
In the recording booth, or like in kind of character on the show?
You could do either one. The recording booth, if you want to do that, that's fine.
Yeah. I loved working with, everyone, first of all, but I loved specific moments with each. Grey Delisle, who voiced Azula, she is the sweetest person. I think she is like Sugar impersonated, and she's just an absolute sweetheart. And then when she would go from, chatting in the booth to then kind of voicing Azula, it would just be this sharp turn from like syrup to just hatred, and it was so fascinating to watch. And so I just loved watching her face go from so serene to so pointed. And same with Dante. Dante is kind of, he's hilarious. If any of you listen to or watch Dante currently, he hasn't changed much in the best way possible. And I remember he would show up, a few minutes late, motorcycle helmet under his arm, and just be like, "Sorry, I'm late." And I was like, "Oh my gosh!" It's like you are Zuko. It's so funny. Yeah. So I don't know. I loved watching kind of the transition from the characters' real personalities to their avatar personalities. That was really fun to watch.
Yeah, I was gonna say, as far as like Dante, yeah, no, he definitely, following him like on social media and stuff, like it seems like he definitely hasn't changed, which is, pretty funny, and I'm sure he gets it all the time, people just saying like, "Oh, like you're Prince Zuko."
Yep. All the time.
And now your character, so you weren't introduced until the second season. Did you find it challenging at all, coming into the show where this group of core characters had already been together a little while together?
Yes and no. I think Mike and Brian were, well, first of all, they are brilliant, as we all know, but they did such a great job in just giving her such a background. We met her family. We met her alone. We met her in the ring. We met her interacting with Aang and Sokka and Katara. We got to see her in all of these different atmospheres in one episode. And so I think they covered a lot of ground in 24 minutes, just giving you kind of the heart and the background and the mentality of this character, so that by the time she joined, you might not have been as familiar, but you definitely knew who she was. And so I think it didn't feel like I had to keep proving myself. And, in the episodes to come, when I start kind of butting heads with Katara and just saying like, "Oh, I'm pulling my own weight. I don't need to help you." she kind of just has her own personality that's such a different color than everybody else that you have to pay attention to her. You know, there's this gravity that she just holds, haha, gravity, with her own with her own being. So it definitely was like, oh, cool, I'm more regular now, but it didn't feel like I had to keep asking for a place. You know, I feel like she was carved out a very prominent one, and then she was able to sustain it and keep it. So yeah, it was pretty easy to get used to.
And that's always good, too, because sometimes, you know, it can be a challenge, you know, sometimes coming into a show that's already been, like, established and stuff like that. So, you know, it's good that you felt it pretty, like, easy, it seems like. And now, you know, Toph, she's such a strong, like, independent character, which kind of goes into, you know, what you were just kind of talking about as far as, like, the writing and stuff like that goes. At one point, did you realize the impact of her character and, like, just, like, what it had on the fans?
It definitely took a second. Especially because we stopped recording when I was basically, I think, a freshman in high school. And so I also still did not have TV at that point. So I wasn't watching along whenever they were released on Nickelodeon. And it took a couple years, I think, for me to just recognize how popular it had become. And, you know, I got some fan mail at the time, but it was very different because Instagram and just kind of computers and having a website and everything in general was just a little bit antiquated still. At that point, it wasn't really a thing that existed. So it, I don't know. It just took a second for me to finally realize. I think when college, after I graduated from high school, when Instagram finally, you know, came alive and people were able to start sharing memes on Reddit and then share it to their story and then send things around, and just numbers grew because people from all over the world were able to connect about it. That's kind of when I started to realize. As far as Toph specifically, I think, I don't know, early on there were just some really, really heartfelt fan letters from either ladies who were blind themselves or other young folk who were disabled in some other way, and they just were so grateful that there was somebody in a TV show, in an animated TV show, that they could relate to, and who didn't let that disability really get in her way at all. She just kept doing her thing and made a joke out of it almost any time she could. And so it just kind of was a combination of those earlier on letters, and then probably when social media picked up in, like, you know, 2014, 2015, around there, when it really started to get big. Yeah. I was going to say, you know, I imagine it must be just like, as, you know, an actor too, and having this character resonate with people, you know, that much, it must be something that just, like, feels, like, really rewarding to you, I'm sure, too. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's something that I can't really explain. I mean, I'll never be over it. I'm so grateful because there are some characters that are, you know, amazing to play and either super fun or super attractive, or they have a great costume or something like that. But having somebody who just, I don't know, kind of leads the way for lots of people who feel like they aren't represented, or feel like there's somebody that they can connect to, there's just something really special about that. So I'm forever grateful, always.
And so I have to ask, what are your thoughts on the upcoming, you know, live action Netflix Avatar The Last Airbender? And as a fan, what direction would you like to see the show go?
Well, first of all, I'm very excited because I think Mike and Brian finally having their, you know, say in the matter is going to make a huge difference. And I also know that they're very careful creators in the best way possible. You know, they made Avatar 3 seasons on purpose. And even when people clamored for more, they said, no, this is the story. This is what it is. And you're all going to like it. And so I think that they are very, I guess, strong-willed when it comes to what they know their story is. So I think having them just kind of at the forefront is going to be super great. Now, as far as being a fan goes, seeing what direction it takes, I honestly think, I mean, I don't know if everybody else feels this way, but I would just love to see it happen as close to what the original series kind of did as possible. I think what they did was already brilliant. I don't think there needs to be too much added or taken away. I feel like they don't have to try to infuse it with like more, I don't know, more friendships or more relationships or more cast members. I feel like it's so strong on its own already. So I'd love to see it as accurately portrayed as possible. And I also want to see what happens whenever they try to bring all the animals to life. That's what I'm really curious. I wonder what Appa's going to look like. You know, that's like my main, what is Momo going to sound like? How is that going to work? That's my main curiosity.
For sure. No, I think, I mean, with like, you know, with the technology, even though, I mean, the show, it's 15 years old, but it's not something that's like, you know, like super old, but even just the technology, even from then to now, has improved so much. So it's, it'll definitely be cool to see what they do. I also would like to kind of see, you know, I think it would be interesting to see the, you know, what kind of happened, that gap in between, you know, Avatar and Legend of Korra. I know they have like the comic books and like stuff like that, but that might be something to kind of be cool to like explore that as well.
Yeah, maybe like a bonus episode, you know, maybe instead of just ending with the comet, maybe there's like a little extended part, like at the end of Harry Potter, I don't know, where they have an extra 5 minutes where you see some developments, or I don't know. Yeah, that would be kind of fun to see. You're right.
Yeah. And, you know, I'm a big fan of behind the scenes kind of stuff, you know, how everything like works. I just like love reading and like hearing about that kind of stuff. So can you just kind of walk us through what the process of, you know, doing like an episode of Avatar The Last Airbender was like, as far as like a voice artist perspective?
Yeah, definitely. So typically, I was in school at the time. You didn't necessarily have to, well, all right, yeah, let me back up a little bit. So if you're under 18, you're technically, you know, a youth, right? So you have different rules that apply to you than if you're an adult. And so if you're on set for a certain amount of time, then you have to be like in set school, quote unquote, for a certain amount of time. So they don't, you know, miss your schooling time, basically. So I had to make sure that I either recorded after school or if it was during the day, which I didn't end up needing to do because they were great with scheduling, it had to be under a certain amount of time. I think it had to be under an hour or something like that. So we always made sure that it was after school. Typically, I went in every Tuesday or every other Tuesday, and they would send me the episode script ahead of time. And there may be edits on the day of that, you know, I needed to shift a little bit, but usually it was pretty true to what they sent me. And I would read through, highlight my lines, you know, sound them out, see what was happening in the episode, and then I would head into the studio, and they'd say, you know, no revisions, you're good. Or they'd be like, oh, you know, page 17, we're revising, you know, this line here before whatever. And I'd make a little note, or they'd give me a new page. And then we would plop down. I usually have water next to me or tea, plop on my headphones, do a little sound test just with the microphone, volume levels, all that jazz. And then just go through page by page and, you know, go in with either a marker, if they had the animation already set up above on the TV screen. I would sometimes watch along and try to say my line at the same time. That wasn't always the case. Sometimes I would just say them kind of freely timed, I suppose. And then oftentimes, whenever there were shorter lines, I would give them 3 options. That's a popular thing to do, or was anyway, for animation shows. If, you know, there was a thing like, come on, guys, something short like that. You'd give them 3 different ways, like, come on, guys, come on, guys, come on, guys, you know, 3 different ways. And then the director, Andrea, would be like, great, we're good, we'll use the 3rd one. Or she'll be like, oh, you know what, do more like that 3rd one. Give me 3 more that are closer to, like, the 3rd one that you did. And then I'd go back through and do that. So then once I got through the whole script, they would just check, make sure that they'd done everything for the day, and they'd say, okay, great, thanks, Jessie, we're good for the day. So that's pretty much in detail what would happen for an episode.
Now, and so I'm curious, because I know you said, you know, obviously with like the laws for like minors and stuff like that, did you ever go to the set, I guess, like when you weren't working and just to maybe like watch someone else like deliver lines? Was that something that was like allowed, or?
I didn't. I was kind of busy. Actually, I did end up, getting there a little bit early, or maybe I would stay a little bit after, and just sit in the booth, not in the recording booth, but in just the general kind of sound booth area, and maybe watch May or watch Jack or somebody start or end their session. But I never came in just specifically to listen to somebody or to watch somebody. I don't know if it was allowed or not, but I ended up kind of being busy with school things and whatever cross-country stuff that was happening at the time. So I didn't go in for other episodes that I wasn't recording on.
And you briefly kind of, mentioned a little bit about just like, relationship with as far as like Mike and Brian. But one of the things, with this show is just like it has such a rich, like history and just like all the different aspects of the storytelling. So was there ever a point like, reading like scripts, stuff like that, was there ever a point where you went to them and just kind of asked them kind of where they came up with like these different ideas?
Honestly, I don't really think so. In the best way possible. I think, if anything, my brain was just kind of like, wow, this is cool. You guys made this. But they were just so great. They're just so great at creating, realistic and relatable dialogue and circumstances, and intentions and faults in kind of all of their characters, that it never was like where did this come from? Like, this seems new or unfamiliar, or like, how did you come up with this? It all just kind of made sense on the page. It's like something you might not necessarily think of yourself, but then when you see it, you're like, oh, well, of course, that makes sense. Like when you see a turtle duck, you're like, oh, well, of course. It's like, of course, that makes sense. So I think, once again, like, they just did such a great job in normalizing this new world that everyone was like, well, of course you firebend when you're mad. What do you mean? It's like, it's just this kind of surreal acceptance that everyone across the board just kind of, got on board with.
No, yeah, that was like, kind of what I like meant, is like just like the all the different like creatures and stuff like that, just all of like the mythology, like, rewatching it, seeing like the show a couple times now, it's just like you're watching and you're just like, where do you like come up with the ideas for like these, different animals and stuff like that? So yeah, I was just curious, but that, that's fair enough. Kind of just like, go with it.
Yeah. I mean, I've learned more as I'm older now, and I've been following Mike and Brian on Instagram and just have, become friends with a lot more artists. There's just a lot of trial and error across the board. And talking with Dee Bradley, who voiced all of the animals, I asked him actually about voicing them. That was more of a, I don't know, quandary to me at the time. I was like, how do you come up with a new sound for this creature? And where do you start? And he's like, it's constant. I'm making sounds all the time. And whenever I find something new or find something that I like, I just make sure to record it and practice it so that it becomes kind of normal in my reservoir. And I feel like that's pretty similar for a lot of artists as well. And animators, they kind of create this new being or this new world, and then they're like, okay, well, what if we made it green? What if it had 6 legs? How would that look? And would that fit into what the rest of the world looks like? And so I think that it just became a lot of trial and error, and then they decided what to keep afterwards.
That makes sense. And now, if you didn't voice Toph, was there any other characters from the show that you would have liked to play?
I really enjoy Ty Lee, and I feel very happy that I know Olivia Hack and that we've done a lot of anime conventions together, actually. But I think she is a kind of real-life doppelganger in one sense, but also would just be super fun to play on the show, because I feel like she's kind of Fire Nation, quote unquote, but she's not really a bender, and she's kind of this happy-go-lucky circus flirt who just, I don't know, she's always so light and evil, and everybody else who's evil has this kind of dark energy except for her. And so it's kind of confusing, because you're like, oh, I want to like go get a smoothie with you, but you'll probably kill me. So it's like very strange, but I just think she's so fun to watch. So I would love to, if not Toph, probably voice her.
And that's when they're doing a good job, when, exactly like you said, it's like, I want to go get ice cream with you, but I have to worry about you might possibly sneak up behind me and kill me. So
yeah, exactly.
Now, I know you have to wrap up. Is there anything else as far as, you just want to say to the fans of Avatar? Like I said, it's been 15 years since the show's been on TV. Is there anything else you would just like to say to the fans?
Just that everything is still relevant. I think you can always find something new and relatable. I think it's a great show for any age, any space, to kind of bring in, I don't know, just a new perspective. If somebody asks for a recommendation of a show, I feel like it's perfect. And just to keep an eye out on Netflix, I'm doing the same thing as everybody else, just keeping an eye out for Mike and Brian and Netflix to say hey, we're starting this live action business. I'm just as excited as everybody else. So yeah, and in light of everything, because the world is crazy right now, just to stay safe and sane and be smart. Yeah. And just try to be Katara these days. Be smart.
For sure. And thank you again, Michaela, so much. I really appreciate, you taking time out of, your busy schedule to come on the show and do this. So thank you again so much.
Hey, this is Michaela Jill Murphy. I voiced Toph Beifong on Avatar The Last Airbender, and you're watching Pop Culture with Pat. Make sure to check it out, Twinkle Toes.